It was exactly 7:12 a.m. when my phone started ringing. I picked it up, and my daughter's voice came through cold and completely flat. Dad, Grandpa passed away last night. The funeral is this Friday. He left absolutely everything to me and my husband. You're getting nothing. In the background, I could hear my son-in-law laughing, a sharp, cruel sound. Before hanging up, she added one final line. You're out. I didn't argue. I didn't hang up either. Instead, I just put the phone on speaker. Because right at that exact moment, Grandpa was sitting right next to me at the kitchen table, holding a cup of coffee, completely alive and well. He leaned closer to the phone, but just as he opened his mouth to say a single word, I truly appreciate you being here and taking the time to listen to this story. Before we continue, I'd love to hear from you. Where are you listening from today? Leave a comment below so we can connect across different places and experiences. And just so you know, this story includes some dramatized details created for education and reflection. Any resemblance to real events is coincidental, but the lessons within it are genuine and valuable. It was exactly 7:12 a.m. when my phone started ringing. Dad, Grandpa passed away last night. My daughter's voice came through cold and completely flat. The funeral is this Friday. He left absolutely everything to me and my husband. You're getting nothing. In the background, I could hear my son-in-law laughing, a sharp, cruel sound. Then she added, You're out. I didn't argue. I didn't hang up either. Instead, I just put the phone on speaker, because Grandpa was sitting right next to me at the kitchen table, holding a cup of coffee, completely alive and well. He leaned closer to the phone and said just one word, Sarah. Dead silence followed. Then came the sound of a sharp gasp on the other end of the line. What? Her voice cracked. Who is this? As sure as I am sitting right here, Grandpa said calmly, at Richard's kitchen table, drinking my coffee, alive and well. More silence. I could hear faint, muffled voices. Sarah was talking to someone, probably Brandon. It sounded panicked, angry. This is crazy, she said. Finally, her tone shifted. Dad, I don't know what kind of game you and Grandpa are playing, but I got a call from the hospital last night. They said what? Grandpa's voice turned stern. Which hospital, Sarah? She hesitated. Denver Presbyterian, the ICU. They said you collapsed and were in critical condition. I haven't stepped foot in Denver Presbyterian in 5 years, Grandpa said. So whoever called you was lying, and you didn't even bother to verify it before calling Richard to tell him I was gone, and he was cut out of the will. She stammered. I was told. By whom? Grandpa leaned in closer. Who told you I was gone, Sarah? Another long pause. Then her voice turned cold again. This is ridiculous. I'm not playing this game. If you're not dead, fine. But don't you dare accuse me of... Accuse you of what? Grandpa asked calmly. Accusing you of lying. Accusing you of celebrating. Or accusing you of trying to claim an inheritance before the body is even cold. The line went dead. I stared at the phone for a long moment, my heart hammering against my ribs. Grandpa carefully set his coffee down. She knew, he said quietly. She knew I wasn't dead. The whole call was scripted. She was testing to see if you'd buy it, or maybe she was trying to establish an alibi, I said. My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. If something actually happened to you, she could just claim she was confused. Say she got the wrong information and call it all a big misunderstanding. Grandpa nodded slowly. Smart. Cruel, but smart. I placed my phone on the table, my hands trembling. Thank God Daniel wasn't a part of that call. My son was out in Seattle dealing with early onset Parkinson's and trying to raise his 2 kids, Emma and Liam. He didn't need to hear his sister's cruelty. He didn't need to know what she had become. Margaret always used to say Daniel had the heart of an angel, too kind, too trusting, especially when it came to his own sister. What do we do? I asked. Grandpa reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small digital recorder. A red light was blinking on it. We record everything, every call, every lie, every threat, because this isn't over. This is just the beginning. He pressed the stop button on the recorder. The red light went out. Margaret warned me about this, he whispered. 3 years ago, before she passed, she told me Sarah was digging into the estate, asking about the will, asking how much everything was worth. She said sooner or later, Sarah would come for us. His jaw tightened. I didn't want to believe her at the time, but Margaret was right. What else did she say? Grandpa looked at me for a long time. She said, protect you, no matter what it takes, because Sarah won't stop until she has it all. He stood up, walked over to the window, and looked out at the Denver skyline. The morning light was just starting to break through the clouds. Call Patricia Anderson, he said. Tell her we need to meet today. Patricia? I asked the estate lawyer. Estate and elder law attorney, Grandpa corrected. If Sarah is planning what I think she's planning, we're going to need someone who knows how to handle dirty tactics. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Patricia's number. Before I could even hit dial, a notification popped up at the top of my screen. An email from First Colorado Bank sent at 6:47 a.m. fraud alert. Unauthorized access attempt. My heart sank. Grandpa, I whispered, check your email. He pulled out his phone. As he looked at the screen, his face turned pale. 3 banks, he said. 3 fraud alerts, all from this morning. We looked at each other. Sarah wasn't just testing the waters. She was already executing her plan. I didn't hesitate to follow his silent instruction. My thumb hit the button, and suddenly Sarah's voice wasn't just in my ear anymore. It filled the small kitchen, sounding sharp and crystal clear in the morning quiet. My father leaned back in his chair, folding his hands on the table in front of him, watching my phone like a judge watching a witness take the stand. Hello? Are you listening? Or are you too busy crying? The words hung in the air between us. My father's expression didn't change at all. He simply reached for his coffee cup, took a slow sip, and never broke his gaze from the phone. Sarah kept talking, and I could hear a shift in her tone now. Less sharp, more rehearsed, like she had practiced this part. Look, I know this is hard to hear, but Grandpa was old. It was time. And honestly, the money he's been spending on you lately, maintaining that little apartment of yours, your pathetic little lifestyle, it just wasn't sustainable. My pathetic little lifestyle. She said it again, and this time it echoed through the speaker for both of us to hear clearly. My father set his cup down with absolute deliberation. The thing is, Sarah continued, and I could hear the sound of papers rustling on her end now. We need to move quickly. The estate lawyer says if there are no disputes, we can transfer all the assets within 30 days. And there shouldn't be any disputes, because Grandpa's wishes were very clear. Brandon's voice chimed in, moving closer to the phone now. We're aiming to list the evergreen property by the weekend. $2.1 million. Lisa Parker over at Park Hill Realty is already drafting the listing paperwork. She says with 40 acres and views like that, it'll go fast. $2.1 million. In that moment, the number felt incredibly vulgar, as if the only thing that mattered about that property was its market value. Not the 40 years my mother spent there, not the wildflowers she planted along the fence line every spring, not the creek where my father taught me to tie a fly when I was 7 years old. Just a number, just another asset to be liquidated. Mountain properties are hot right now, Brandon continued eagerly. We might even drive up a bidding war. And then there's the commercial building downtown. That's the real prize. You don't even know what that thing is worth, do you, Richard? I bet you don't. Your old man kept that one close to the chest. I felt my spine straighten. The commercial building downtown. My father met my eyes and gave a very slight shake of his head. Not yet. Don't react yet. Sarah's voice came back, softer now, almost trying to sound kind. Dad, I know you're probably hurting, but you have to understand, this is what Grandpa wanted. He wanted his assets to go to people who could actually do something with them. People with ambition and, well, vision. You've always been content just scraping by, and that's fine. But that's not the legacy he wanted to leave. The cruelty of it was almost elegant. She had found a way to blame my father's passing on my failures, wrapping the theft up as some sort of righteous act, as if she were honoring his memory instead of counting his money, before anyone had even confirmed he was gone. My father reached into the breast pocket of his flannel shirt. The movement was slow, almost casual, but there was a weight to it that made the air in the kitchen feel heavy. He pulled out a small black device, no bigger than a deck of cards, and set it on the table between us. A digital audio recorder, the kind lawyers use for depositions. A red indicator light was blinking steadily on its face. I realized then that it had been blinking the entire time. He had started recording long before Sarah's call ever came through. Sarah was still talking, her voice coming through the speaker with that perfectly manufactured gentleness. "We'll make sure you're taken care of. Obviously, we're not heartless. Maybe we can help you find a smaller place, something more affordable. Brandon knows some landlords who—" "Hello, Sarah." My father's voice cut through her words like a blade through water. Simple, calm, and level. The words shouldn't have had the power to stop the world, but somehow they did. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy with shock, realization, and the sound of a carefully constructed lie falling apart. I counted the seconds in my head. 1, 2, 3. Then came the sound of a sharp gasp on the other end of the line. "Grandpa?" Sarah's voice lost all its rehearsed composure. It sounded thin, uncertain. "How? Where?" In the background I heard movement, the sound of something dropping. Brandon might have dropped his phone or knocked something over. Then came his voice, sharp and tight with panic. "Wait, what? He's there? He's at Richard's?" More shuffling, frantic whispering. Sarah's voice was muffled now, like she had her hand over the microphone. "You said the hospital confirmed it." Brandon's voice flared up. "They confirmed it. I saw the—" More whispering. A door slamming, then quiet as they scrambled to regroup. My father reached for the sealed manila envelope he had tapped earlier, the one with the attorney's letterhead. He held it up to eye level, showing it to me, not opening it, just confirming its existence. Then he placed it right next to the recording device, setting up a small display of evidence on the worn kitchen table. When Sarah's voice came back, it had found some semblance of stability, but I could hear the fracture underneath. "Grandpa, thank God. We got a call last night saying you—" "No, you didn't. Just 3 words. The same calm tone. The same absolute certainty." My father leaned into the phone, his voice carrying that specific quality it got when he was no longer tolerating nonsense. "You didn't get a call, Sarah. You made a call. Or rather, Brandon made several calls, to 3 different banks, all between 6:47 and 7:04 this morning, all of them attempting to report my passing, all of them before you ever called your father to deliver the news. I watched my daughter's defenses crumble in real time, even though I could only hear it. The silence on the line was different now. It wasn't shock. It was calculation. She was trying to find an angle, a way to make this sound reasonable. "Go ahead," my father said, his hand resting near the recording device. "Richard and I are listening, and this is listening too." He tapped the recorder. "Every word you've said this morning, every claim, every threat, every lie, it's all right here, for the record." The red light kept blinking steadily, patient and impartial, counting down the silence of every passing second like an inevitability. The silence on the line stretched for 2 full heartbeats. Then Sarah's voice returned, but the venom was entirely gone, replaced by something meant to sound reassuring to a stranger. "Grandpa." "Oh, thank God." Her tone practically dripped with fake relief. We thought something had happened. Brandon and I have been so worried." "Save it." Grandpa Williams' voice cut through her performance like a scalpel. He hadn't moved from his chair, hadn't even shifted his coffee cup. The only change was the slight tightening at the corners of his eyes. "I know exactly what you thought, Sarah, and I know exactly what you've been doing." I looked at my father's face as he spoke. 86 years old, but in that moment he looked like a judge delivering a verdict. "I don't know what you're talking about." Sarah's voice was cautious now, choosing her words with extreme care. "Dad and I were just looking out for the estate planning. You're not getting any younger, and we wanted to make sure—" "Make sure of what?" Grandpa leaned forward slightly, his eyes locked onto the phone between us. "Make sure I signed the right paperwork? Is that what you were doing last Tuesday, October 8th, at Denver General?" Another silence, longer this time. I felt a tightening in my chest. Last Tuesday was the day Grandpa went in for his pre-colonoscopy prep. He had asked me to drive him, but I had a meeting with contractors about the fence line on the Evergreen property. Sarah had volunteered, saying she wanted to spend time with him. "I was there to support you," Sarah said, but her voice lost some of its steadiness. You were anxious about the procedure? I was sedated, Grandpa said coldly. Twilight anesthesia. The kind that leaves you feeling pleasant but just aware enough to sign your name if someone puts a pen in your hand. My heart sank. That's when he showed up, Grandpa continued, his tone never rising, never losing that icy, measured control. Your friend? Brandon's college roommate? The one you introduced as an attorney who just happened to be on the same floor visiting a patient. I heard a muffled sound on the line, Brandon trying to say something. Sarah hushed him with a sharp hiss I could barely catch. His name is Ethan Miller, Grandpa said, though I doubt that's the name he gave the hospital staff. He entered my recovery room at 2:47 p.m. You were with him, Sarah. You told the nurse I was your father. That was your first mistake, because the nurse knew very well I only have a son. I stared at the table. The cream-colored, unmarked manila envelope sat right next to the digital recorder, with its blinking red light. Evidence, Grandpa had said. Every word. The nurse didn't say anything at the time, Grandpa continued, but she made a note in my chart. When I woke up from the sedation an hour later and asked what I had signed, she showed me the entry. Patient appeared confused. Signed documents presented by daughter and visitor, claiming to be an attorney. Signatures not witnessed. Note made for patient protection. This is ridiculous. Sarah's voice came back, sharp and defensive. If you're trying to say I'm not trying to say anything. I'm telling you what happened. Grandpa's finger tapped the table once, a sharp, clean sound. You handed me a power of attorney, a durable POA, one that gave you and Brandon complete control over my financial affairs, including the power to sell property, access accounts, and make medical decisions on my behalf. Ethan Miller stood there in his cheap suit with his fake briefcase, telling me it was standard estate planning procedure. And in my fog, I believed him. I felt a chill run down my spine, a durable power of attorney. That would have given Sarah everything. Access to Grandpa's accounts, the evergreen land, the downtown property. But here's the catch, Sarah. Grandpa's voice dropped lower, quieter, and somehow that made it worse. The hospital has cameras. Every recovery room, every hallway. When I pulled the security footage 2 days later, there you were, clear as day. You, Brandon's friend Ethan, and a document with a forged signature. That's a lie. Sarah's voice cracked slightly on the last word. We were just trying to help. Ethan Miller confessed 4 days ago, Grandpa said, to the notary compliance investigator at the Colorado Secretary of State's office. He admitted you paid him $3,000 to pose as an attorney, file the paperwork, and witness a signature I never actually gave. He admitted the signature on that power of attorney was traced from an old document, and he admitted that when he realized the state was investigating, he decided cooperation was a lot better than a felony fraud charge. The air in the room felt thick. I realized I had been holding my breath. $3,000, Grandpa repeated softly. That's what you paid to try and steal an $80 million estate. We didn't steal anything! Sarah's voice exploded through the speaker. All the pretense was gone now. We were protecting the family assets. You're 86 years old, Grandpa. You're not capable of managing wealth of this scale anymore. Someone had to step in before... Before what? Grandpa's voice was ice. Before I gave it all to Richard? Before I put it into a trust where you couldn't touch it? Is that what this is about? You don't understand. Sarah was breathing heavily now, her words fast and fragmented. Brandon and I sacrificed everything to stay close to this family. Our lives have been on hold. Our careers... Your careers? Grandpa let out a short, humorless laugh. Brandon hasn't worked in 4 years. And the last time you held a job, Sarah, you were let go for falsifying expense reports. Don't talk to me about sacrifice. This isn't fair. Fair? Grandpa's hand came down hard on the table. The sharp crack made me flinch. You want to talk about fair? You tried to forge my signature while I was sedated in a hospital bed. You bribed a man to pose as an attorney. You violated my trust, my dignity, and the law. And you did it because you thought I was too old and too trusting to notice. A brief silence, then very quietly, almost gently. But I noticed, Sarah. I noticed everything. I looked at my father. His face was calm, but his jaw was set. It was the look I'd known since I was a kid. The look he gave me when he'd caught me in a lie and was waiting for me to come clean. "The video is saved," Grandpa said. "The investigator's report is filed. The forged power of attorney is held as evidence, and Ethan Miller's statement has been notarized and witnessed. You don't have anything— You never did, you old bastard?" Sarah's voice was shaking now. Though whether from anger or fear, I couldn't tell. "You set us up. You knew all along." "I knew you'd try," Grandpa said simply. "Margaret warned me before she passed. She told me to watch you, to protect Richard and this estate. I did. Margaret, my late wife, she had passed away from cancer 3 years ago, taken so quickly it left us all reeling. Hearing her name brought a sharp ache to my chest. "This isn't over," Sarah hissed. "You think you're so smart, but there are other ways." "Yes," Grandpa said quietly, "there are. Which brings me to my next question." He leaned back in his chair. For the first time since the call began, I saw the faintest trace of what could only be described as satisfaction on his face. "So is that why you called 3 different banks at 6:47 this morning, attempting to report that I was deceased?" When Grandpa threw out that question, it was met with absolute silence. It wasn't the kind of silence where someone is thinking about what to say. It was the kind where they've been caught red-handed, and they know it. I looked at Grandpa's face. He didn't move. His coffee sat untouched, growing cold in the morning light. The red light of the digital recorder continued its steady blink between us, patient and relentless. Grandpa's voice was quiet, almost gentle. "Would you care to answer that?" Nothing. Not even the sound of breathing on the other end of the line. Then very deliberately, Grandpa reached across the table and slid his phone toward me. Not the one on speakerphone, but his personal cell, face up next to the recorder. The screen was already illuminated, open to his email inbox. "Read it out loud," he said. I looked down. 3 emails sat at the top of the list, all flagged in red, all from this morning. The subject lines made my stomach tighten. "First Colorado Bank," I read, my voice rougher than I expected. "Security alert. Unauthorized death notification attempt. Received at 6:52 a.m. I looked up at Grandpa. He nodded. "Keep going." "Rocky Mountain Credit Union. Fraud alert. Account access request denied. Received at 6:58 a.m. My throat felt tight. "Western States Trust. Urgent. Suspicious activity detected on account ending in 4739. Received at 7:04 a.m. I set the phone down carefully, like it might break. All 3 emails, all sent before Sarah's call at 7:12. "Those alerts," Grandpa said, his eyes still fixed on the phone between us, "were triggered when someone called each of those institutions this morning. Someone identifying themselves as my daughter, claiming I had passed away during the night. Someone demanding immediate access to account information, including balances and beneficiary details." His voice never rose, and it never turned sharp. It was the exact same tone you'd hear from someone reading the weather forecast. "Every bank has a strict protocol for dealing with a death notification," he continued. "They require a death certificate, or, at the very least, a phone call from a verified next of kin with written authorization. The person who called this morning didn't have either of those things, but they did have one piece of information." He paused. "They called using an email address that has been on file with 2 of those banks for the past 8 months. It's an address tied to a joint account I set up under the pretense of future estate planning." Grandpa tapped his phone screen, pulling up one of the alerts. He turned the device around so I could see the details at the bottom. Request originated from Brandon Mitchell, 11989@gmail.com. A sudden wave of ice washed over my chest. "Brandon?" "Yes, Brandon," Grandpa said calmly. "Your son-in-law made those calls, Richard, using his own email from his own phone. At 6:47 this morning, he called 3 different institutions trying to report my passing." The absolute silence on the other end of the line finally broke. "That wasn't—" Sarah's voice sounded completely choked up, like she couldn't catch her breath. "That wasn't supposed to—" "Supposed to what?" Grandpa's tone was pure ice. "Supposed to go unnoticed? Supposed to not leave a trail?" "This was your plan!" Brandon's voice suddenly exploded through the speaker, rough and filled with pure panic. "You told me to call them. You said we had to move fast before anyone else did." "I didn't tell you to use your own email, you idiot!" Sarah's voice cracked sharply. "I told you to use a burner phone and a fresh email. I told you. You said it would be fine," Brandon fired back. "You said Grandpa was old and wouldn't even check his emails until noon. By the time anyone realized, oh my God, Brandon, listen to what you're saying." Sarah was shouting now, every shred of her composure entirely gone. "You just admitted to wire fraud on a recorded line. You were the one who said, I didn't say anything. This was your idea. You wanted, don't you dare pin this on me." Brandon's voice turned hoarse. "I'm not taking the fall for you, Sarah. If I'm going down, you're coming with me. Because this whole thing was—" The line went dead. Not a regular hang-up, but a sudden violent cut. Someone had ended the call mid-sentence, and I couldn't tell if Sarah or Brandon had smashed their phone, or if they both did. The abrupt silence in the room felt even louder than the shouting. I stared down at my phone on the table. The screen had gone black. The small light on the recorder kept blinking its steady red, the only sign of movement left in the kitchen. Grandpa leaned back in his chair. For the very first time since the call started, I saw a flicker of absolute exhaustion cross his face. It only lasted for a second. Then it was gone, replaced by that same calm, measured control. "They're finished," he said softly. I didn't even know what to say. My daughter, my own daughter, had just screamed a confession to bank fraud on a recorded line. She had thrown her husband under the bus, and he had thrown her right back. She had completely self-destructed in real time, right in front of my father and me. I felt physically sick. "Grandpa," I finally spoke, my voice barely a whisper, "what exactly just happened?" He looked at me, really looked at me, with the exact same expression he used to give me when I was a kid, and asked a question he had been waiting for. "What happened," he said slowly, "is that your daughter and her husband just tried to steal an $80 million estate by fabricating a death, forging legal documents, and committing interstate wire fraud." He stated it so simply and directly, like he was explaining how to change a flat tire. "The hospital scheme was their first attempt," he continued, "forging the power of attorney. When that fell through, and when I caught them and filed a formal complaint, they escalated. They decided that if they couldn't control my assets while I was breathing, they would just report me dead and try to claim them before anyone bothered to verify it." I felt the kitchen start to tilt slightly, or maybe it was just me. But here is what they didn't know," Grandpa said, and there was a sharp edge to his voice now, something that sliced straight through the fog in my mind. "The FBI has been investigating Brandon for 2 weeks. I blinked. What? Wire fraud, interstate scams, financial exploitation of the elderly." Grandpa counted the charges off on his fingers like a grocery list. "Brandon has been targeting seniors with online schemes for at least 6 months. Small amounts, spread across multiple states. Never enough to trigger a major red flag on their own. But when you add them all up," he shrugged, "the FBI's Financial Crimes Division has been building a case. They contacted me 12 days ago as part of their investigation." My mouth went completely dry. "You've been working with the FBI?" "Assisting," Grandpa corrected. "They needed documentation, evidence of a pattern, and clear intent. I gave them access to my accounts, my emails, my phone logs, everything." He pointed to the phone on the table. "This morning's call, the bank alerts, that's not just evidence of fraud, Richard. That's evidence of ongoing fraud. Active, documented with federal witnesses." I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. "When Sarah called you at 7:12, Grandpa said softly, "she thought she was ahead of the game. She thought Brandon had successfully reported my passing, that the banks were processing the claims, and all she had to do was play the grieving granddaughter while they moved the assets into accounts she controlled." He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto mine. "She didn't know the banks had already flagged those calls as fraudulent. She didn't know Brandon's email had been under federal surveillance for a week, and she certainly didn't know I was sitting right here, alive, recording every single word." The red light kept blinking. "Margaret told me," Grandpa whispered, 3 years ago. Right before she passed, she told me Sarah was asking about the estate, asking about the will, asking when I planned to step back from managing things. Margaret said she had a terrible feeling, that I needed to be careful." His voice broke slightly at the mention of his late wife. "I didn't believe her at the time," he said. "Not entirely. Not until Sarah showed up at that hospital with a fake lawyer and a forged document. That's when I knew Margaret was right. That's when I called the FBI back and told them I would assist with their investigation." I stared at my father, 86 years old, wearing a cardigan and reading glasses, sitting at my kitchen table, talking about federal investigations and wire fraud like he was discussing the morning news. "So what happens now?" I asked. Grandpa picked up his coffee and took a slow, deep sip. He set it back down. "Now," he said, "we wait for a knock on their front door." The silence in the kitchen after the call ended was stifling. Grandpa left the phone on the table. The screen stayed lit, the 3 fraud alerts from the banks glowing like warning flares. Sarah's voice was still echoing in my head, sharp and venomous, before dissolving into pure panic as Brandon's recording played over the speaker. I sat there frozen, staring blankly ahead. "Richard," Grandpa's voice was incredibly gentle. "Breathe." I realized I had been holding my breath again. I let it out slowly, gripping the edge of the table tightly. "She tried to end it," I said, my voice sounding completely hollow. "My daughter tried to have someone end your life. My own—" "We don't know that for sure just yet," Grandpa said cautiously. "But all the signs are there. The hospital incident, the fake death report, the banks, and now this." He pointed to his phone. Marcus Webb's warning about a complete service. Things were escalating fast. I closed my eyes. Images flashed through my mind. Sarah, at 7 years old, sitting on my lap, asking me to read her favorite bedtime story. Sarah, at 16, crying in my arms after her first real heartbreak. Sarah, at 25, standing right beside me at Margaret's funeral, holding my hand as they lowered the casket into the ground. When did it change? When did she turn into this? "Margaret knew," I whispered. Grandpa nodded slowly. "She knew, and I didn't believe her back then." My throat tightened. "She tried to warn me too. She told me Sarah was asking strange questions, that something felt off, and I told her she was just overthinking it. I told her the pain medication was making her anxious." "You were trying to protect your daughter," Grandpa said. "That's not a crime. I was blind. I was just a father." I opened my eyes and looked at him. "When did Margaret tell you?" 2 years before she passed," Grandpa said. "Maybe a little earlier. We were sitting out on the back porch of the Evergreen house. She had just come back from lunch with Sarah. They went to that Italian place downtown, Margaret's favorite. She came home incredibly quiet, deeply unsettled. I asked her what was wrong." He paused, his gaze drifting away. "She said Sarah spent the entire lunch asking about the money, the estate, the properties, the trust accounts. It wasn't, 'Mom, how are you feeling?' or 'What did the doctor say?' It was just numbers. Margaret said it felt like Sarah was taking inventory, like she was calculating." I felt sick to my stomach. "Margaret told me she was terrified," Grandpa continued. "Not of dying. She had accepted that part. She was terrified of what Sarah would do once she was gone. She said, 'William, I need you to promise me something. When I'm not here, you have to protect Richard. Sarah is going to come for him. She's going to try to take everything, and Richard won't see it coming because he loves her too much.'" His voice cracked slightly on the last word. "So I promised her. I told her I'd watch, I'd record, I'd be ready. That's when she started keeping a journal, writing down every conversation, every red flag, every single lie, building the file we would eventually need." I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand. "She knew it would get this bad. She knew it was possible." Grandpa's expression was grim. "Margaret said Sarah showed signs early on, little things. Stealing Christmas card money from her cousins when she was 12, forging notes in high school, lying about college expenses. Margaret always made excuses for her. We all did. But near the end, she couldn't ignore it anymore. Margaret had worried about Daniel, too, I remembered. She had mentioned it once, maybe a year before she passed, when Daniel flew in from Seattle to visit. We were sitting in the living room watching Daniel play with his kids, and Margaret leaned over and whispered, "He has the heart of an angel, but he's too soft when it comes to his sister. If she ever gets the chance, she'll exploit that." I hadn't understood what she meant back then. Now it made perfect sense. She was protecting both of us, I whispered. Me and Daniel. She was protecting everyone she loved, Grandpa said. That was just who Margaret was. I looked down at the table, taking in the phone, the recorder, and the fraud alerts. The evidence of my daughter's betrayal was laid out like a crime scene. What do we do now? I asked. Grandpa reached across the table and squeezed my hand tightly. We finish what Margaret started. We protect this family, and we make sure Sarah can never hurt anyone ever again. I nodded. Outside, the morning sun climbed higher into the sky. The city was waking up around us. The sounds of traffic, people, and the hum of daily life continued as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. My phone buzzed. It was an email notification. Park Hill Realty, listing confirmation, Evergreen Estate. My blood ran cold instantly. Grandpa, I said, turning the screen toward him. She's trying to sell the house. He looked at the subject line of the email, his jaw tightening. Get your coat, he said, standing up. We're going to see Patricia right now. I didn't open the email. Not just yet. Instead, I watched Grandpa reach over and push a manila folder toward me. It was the folder that had been sitting right next to the audio recorder and the sealed, unmarked cream envelope all morning. It was packed with documents. Read these first, he said softly. Then that email will make a lot more sense. As I pulled the folder closer, my hands felt completely numb. The paper felt cool and textured under my fingers, carrying the distinct weight of legal documents. I opened it up. Inside were papers arranged in perfect chronological order, each section marked with a neat yellow tab, clean and incredibly organized. It was the work of someone who had been preparing for this exact moment for a very long time. The first tab read, July 2024, conservatorship attempt. I pulled out the documents underneath. It was a formal petition, legal-sized and dense with text. The header made my stomach twist into a knot. In the matter of the conservatorship and guardianship of Richard Michael Stone, my name was right there on a court filing, requesting that I be declared legally incompetent to manage my own affairs. Keep reading, Grandpa said. I scanned the document. The petitioner was Sarah Elizabeth Stone. The grounds: the respondent is exhibiting severe cognitive decline, major depressive disorder, an inability to manage financial affairs, and a total incapacity to make rational decisions regarding his own welfare and estate. The words blurred together on the page. Oh, cognitive decline, depression. My daughter had tried to have me legally declared incapacitated. There's a medical evaluation attached, Grandpa pointed out. Page 4. I flipped through the pages. There it was. A psychological assessment signed by a Dr. James Morrison, practicing clinical psychologist. Except he isn't a psychologist, Grandpa said, his tone entirely flat. Morrison is a friend of Brandon's. They met through some online investment forum. He has a doctorate in education, not psychology. He holds no clinical license in the state of Colorado. In fact, he holds no license anywhere. He practiced in Nevada for 3 years using fake credentials before the state board caught up with him. I stared at the signature on the page, the neat professional letterhead, and the detailed evaluation claiming I showed significant memory, impairment, poor judgment, and depressive symptoms consistent with severe cognitive dysfunction. I had never even met this man. Sarah set that appointment up for you back in July, Grandpa continued. She told you it was for a supplemental health insurance evaluation. You went to an office over in Lakewood and spent 2 hours answering questions. You thought it was just standard bureaucracy, didn't you? I remembered that waiting room with its outdated magazines, the man in the cheap suit who asked me about my daily routine, my finances, and whether I ever felt confused or forgetful. I had found the questions annoying at the time, but completely harmless. Morrison wrote that assessment based on that single meeting, Grandpa said. Then Sarah filed the conservatorship petition the very next week. If it had gone through, she would have been appointed your legal guardian. She would have controlled your bank accounts, your medical decisions, your right to contest my will, or your ability to touch your inheritance. You would have been entirely powerless under the law. The paper crinkled slightly under my grip. How did you stop it? Patricia Anderson, Grandpa said, tapping the next page in the folder. My attorney. I had her review the filing as a courtesy, just to see what Sarah was claiming. Patricia ran a background check on Morrison and discovered he was unlicensed. She filed an emergency motion to dismiss and reported him to the district attorney. I looked at the next document. It was a court order dated August 12th, 2024. Petition dismissed with prejudice. Petitioner ordered to show cause why sanctions should not be imposed for filing fraudulent medical evidence. Sarah withdrew the petition right before the sanctions hearing, Grandpa said. She claimed the whole thing was a massive misunderstanding and that Morrison had misrepresented his credentials to her. The judge didn't buy it, but without Morrison, who vanished right after, there wasn't enough solid evidence to bring criminal charges against Sarah at the time. I carefully set the July documents down, my hands trembling. That was the first attempt, Grandpa said. She tried to go through the courts to control you, so she could ultimately control me. I didn't want to look at the next section, but I forced myself to. The second tab read, September 15th, 2024. Fabricated death certificate. I pulled out the papers. It was a hospital admission form. A routine checkup scheduled for September 15th, a Friday. Just routine blood work and a basic physical. Given Grandpa's age, his doctor recommended monitoring things every quarter. I asked Sarah to drive me, Grandpa said softly. I wanted to see what she would do if given the opportunity. My throat felt completely dry. Nige tashela ju, you set a trap for her. I gave her a chance to prove me wrong. His eyes met mine, steady and sorrowful. But she didn't take it. I kept reading. A name was circled on the hospital staff roster. Jennifer Mason, RN outpatient floor nurse. Jennifer was the nurse who took my vitals that morning, Grandpa said. While I was in the exam room, Sarah asked to speak with her privately, claiming she had questions about my medication schedule. I had a recording device inside my jacket pocket. One of those pens with a built-in microphone. It was running the whole time. He reached over and tapped a small transcription sheet clipped to the hospital forms. I read through the text. Sarah Stone, I need a favor. A really big one. There's $5,000 in this for you. Jennifer Mason, what kind of favor? Sarah Stone, my grandfather is going to pass away very soon. Maybe today, maybe next week. When it happens, I need the paperwork handled immediately, without other family members interfering. Can you assist with that? Jennifer Mason, you want me to issue a death certificate? Sarah Stone, it's his time. Yes, I'll make the call to you. You file the certificate, and the money is yours. Cash, no paper trail. My vision narrowed down to a single point on the page. She didn't even wait, Grandpa said quietly. The very next day, Saturday, September 16th, Jennifer filed a death certificate with Denver County. It listed the time of passing as 3:17 a.m., citing cardiac arrest. The signing physician was listed as Dr. Stevens, who happened to be on vacation in Mexico at the time. She had traced his signature from previous records she had access to. I couldn't even breathe. The bank alerts went off at 6:42 that morning. Grandpa continued, very similar to what happened yesterday. Fraud detection, suspicious notifications, account freeze protocols. Except this time, I was completely prepared. I called Patricia, I called the county clerk, and I called the hospital's compliance office. By noon, Jennifer was in custody. He slid another document toward me, an arrest report dated September 17th. Jennifer Mason, 34, charged with offering a false instrument for filing, forgery, and conspiracy to commit grand jiangshu, grand fraud. She confessed within 6 hours, Grandpa said. Gave up everything. She had already spent $2,000 of the $5,000 Sarah gave her to pay off credit card debt. But that's exactly what caught the FBI's attention. He pointed to a paragraph in the police report that I had skipped over. The suspect admitted to fabricating death certificates on 4 previous occasions, between 2021 and 2024, across 3 states, Nevada, Arizona, and New Mexico. The suspect was recruited through online platforms by individuals seeking to expedite estate settlements and insurance claims. The suspect received fees ranging from $3,000 to $7,000 per incident. Jennifer wasn't just a corrupt nurse, Grandpa said. She was part of a network, an interstate ring that targeted seniors with substantial estates. The FBI's Financial Crimes Division had been tracking her for 8 months, When she handed them Sarah's plan, they got exactly what they needed to tie Sarah into a federal case. I stared at the page, trying to process the information. The FBI started active surveillance on Sarah on September 20th, Grandpa said, tapping phones, monitoring emails, financial records. They contacted me on September 22nd, asking for my cooperation. They needed documentation, recorded evidence, a clear pattern of intent. I gave them everything. "You've been working with the FBI for 3 weeks?" I asked numbly. "Yes." And Sarah had absolutely no idea. Grandpa's expression was incredibly grim. Not until this morning, when she and Brandon admitted to wire fraud on a line that was highly likely being transcribed by the Bureau. I looked down at the documents again. July, September. 2 attempts, 2 failures. October was the 3rd, I said quietly, remembering the hospital incident. Ethan Miller, the forged power of attorney. Yes. Grandpa folded his hands on the table. She escalated each time. July was calculated, trying to control you through the courts. September was desperate, trying to fake my passing while I was still breathing. October was reckless, forging documents while I was sedated, hoping no one would notice. And this morning was pure panic, Grandpa concluded. She knew the October plan had failed. She knew Ethan Miller had confessed. She knew she was running out of time and options. So she and Brandon tried to report me dead before anyone could stop them. They hit 3 banks before sunrise and then called you to make it official. He leaned back, looking suddenly exhausted. But she didn't know the FBI was already watching her. She didn't know the banks had flagged Brandon's email, and she certainly didn't know I was sitting right here recording every word. The morning sun had shifted, casting long shadows across the kitchen table. The coffee in my mug had gone cold hours ago. The red light on the recorder kept blinking, patient and relentless. "There's one more thing," Grandpa said softly. He reached out and tapped my phone, which was still sitting face up on the table where I had left it, after reading the bank fraud emails. "Check your email now," he said. "The one from last night, Park Hill Realty." I picked up the phone, my hand feeling like it belonged to someone else. I opened the email app and found the message. The subject line read, "Confirmation. Evergreen Estate Listing Agreement. Sent Monday at 9:47 p.m. From Park Hill Realty, Jessica Torres, Senior Broker." I opened it up. "Dear Mr. Stone, thank you for authorizing the listing of your property located at 4250 Elkridge Road, Evergreen, Colorado. Per our phone conversation this afternoon, we have entered the property into the MLS system at an asking price of $2,100,000. The listing became active at 5 p.m. today. Our first private showings are scheduled for Wednesday morning at 10 a.m., with an open house set for Saturday, October 19th, from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. I have attached the signed listing agreement and disclosure forms for your records. We look forward to a swift sale. Best regards, Jessica Torres." I stared at the screen. "I never authorized this," I said. "No," Grandpa said quietly. "But someone with a forged power of attorney and access to my email account did." Jessica Torres's email wasn't just a confirmation text. It included an attachment bundle. I scrolled past the main message, past the cheerful sign-off and the Park Hill Realty logo, down to the attachments section. 3 files, all PDFs. I clicked on the first one. Listing agreement. 4250 Elkridge Road. 23 pages of legal boilerplate. A standard real estate contract. Seller disclosures. Commission structures. Marketing authorizations. I scanned through it quickly, my eyes landing on the final signature page. There it was. A signature that was supposed to be Grandpa's. It was neat and steady, completely different from his actual handwriting. Right next to it was a date. October 10th, 2024. My blood ran cold. "Grandpa," I whispered, "what were we doing on October 10th? He didn't even have to think about it. Thursday morning, we drove into Cherry Creek to Patricia Anderson's office. We spent 3 hours going over the estate documents and setting up the contingency funds in case Sarah tried something else. Patricia's secretary brought us lunch after the September incident. We didn't leave until 2:30 p.m. I looked back at the signature. October 10th, signed at 4:15 p.m., according to the notary stamp below it. We were together the entire day, I said. We have an alibi. We have more than that. Grandpa reached over to pull his phone closer, scrolling through his photo library. He turned the screen toward me. It was a selfie. Him, me, and Patricia Anderson in her conference room. All three of us were holding coffee mugs. A wall clock was clearly visible in the background, showing the time as 1:47 p.m. Patricia insisted on taking that photo, saying we should document the day for this exact reason. I stared at the picture on the screen. There it was, hard, cold evidence, complete with a timestamp, a geotag, and a rock-solid witness. They forged another power of attorney, I said, my voice completely flat. Even after Jennifer got arrested, even after they knew the FBI was involved, they just won't stop. Desperation, Grandpa said simply. When their first 3 plans blew up, they had to force the issue. List the property, get an offer on the table, create enough momentum so it becomes incredibly difficult to stop. I clicked on the second attachment, which was a copy of the fraudulent power of attorney itself. It was remarkably sophisticated. It had a notary seal, signatures from witnesses, and specific legal language, granting Sarah Elizabeth Stone the absolute authority to act on behalf of William Charles Stone in all matters regarding real property located in Jefferson County, Colorado. The notary's name listed on the document was Lisa Chen. I quickly searched her name on my phone, and the Colorado Secretary of State's website popped up. Her license had been suspended 3 months ago for notarizing documents without proper identification verification. They used a suspended notary, I said, pointing at the screen, and the document is dated just 2 weeks ago. Jessica Torres probably didn't check, Grandpa said. Why would she? A daughter comes in with official-looking paperwork to sell her elderly father's property. It looks routine. She had no reason to suspect a thing. A deep, bone-crushing exhaustion washed over me. How many people had Sarah dragged into this? How many fake documents had she created? How many officials had she bribed? And how many signatures had she forged? But there's something you need to understand, Richard, Grandpa said, his tone shifting, becoming noticeably heavier. The evergreen property was never the real prize. I looked up from my phone. It's worth $2.1 million, I said. Isn't that enough? This isn't about what's enough. Grandpa pushed his chair back slightly and crossed his hands on the table. Richard, there's one more thing I haven't told you. Another property. The air in the kitchen suddenly felt incredibly thick. 20 years ago, I bought a commercial building in downtown Denver, he said. It was right after your mother passed away. I wanted an investment, an asset that would generate steady income but wouldn't require active day-to-day management. Something I could eventually pass down to you without it becoming a burden. He reached for his phone again and pulled up a photograph. It was a beautiful 6-story building, a mix of brick and glass, featuring a modern renovation built over a historic framework. The address was clearly visible at the bottom, 145 17th Street. Lodo, I whispered. Lower downtown Denver, prime real estate. The ground floor is all retail space, and the top 5 floors are offices, Grandpa continued. It's fully leased, and it has been for years. After expenses, it generates roughly $80,000 a month in rental income. I quickly did the math in my head. $80,000 a month. That was nearly $1 million a year. The current market value of that property, Grandpa said, is right around $14.8 million. The number just hung there between us. $14.8 million. Suddenly, the evergreen estate, with its $2.1 million price tag, 40 acres of land, and the mountain cabin where I grew up vacationing, seemed incredibly small by comparison. Why didn't you ever tell me? I asked. Because I wanted to protect you from exactly what is happening right now. Grandpa gestured toward the files scattered across the table. The building is held under an LLC called Stone Mountain Assets. The ownership structure was deliberately designed to be complex. It has multiple layers, with a trust acting as the managing member. Your name and my name are buried deep in the paperwork. It would take a forensic accountant weeks just to untangle it. He leaned in closer. Margaret knew all about it. Near the end of her life, during her lucid moments, she'd talk about how grateful she was that I set it up this way. She said if anything ever happened to me, it would keep you safe. She knew you'd have a steady income, security, and independence. My throat tightened again at the mention of Margaret. Everything always came back to her. Her warnings, her foresight, her attempts to shield us from harm. She was still protecting us, even from the grave. But Sarah found out, I whispered. I believe she did. Grandpa's jaw tightened. Margaret might have mentioned it during a lunch 5 years ago, or Sarah found the documents while rifling through my study at the Evergreen House. She had access to it. I can't prove she knows about the downtown property, but her actions make it very clear. I mapped it out in my head. The escalating schemes, the desperation, the conservatorship attempt in July. If Sarah controlled me, she could access whatever I inherited. The fake death certificate in September. If Grandpa was legally dead, his assets would go to probate, and Sarah could position herself as the primary heir. The hospital power of attorney in October. Direct control over Grandpa's affairs and property decisions. And now, listing the Evergreen House wasn't about the $2 million payout. It was a test run. It was a way to establish that Sarah had the legal authority to sell Grandpa's property using that forged power of attorney. Once the Evergreen sale went through, once she proved she could execute a real estate transaction with that forged document, the downtown building was next. $14.8 million. That was the real target all along. She could list the downtown property, I said slowly, piecing the logic together, using the exact same forged power of attorney. She'd find a commercial broker, claim you authorized the sale, and even if she sold it 10% below market value for a quick turnaround, she'd walk away with over $13 million clean. And if I were declared dead through a fraudulent certificate, Grandpa added, she could forge the probate documents, claim the LLC passed to her as next of kin, sell the building, and vanish with the money before anyone even realized a fraud had occurred. By the time the courts untangled the mess, she'd be in a country without an extradition treaty. I felt physically ill. This isn't just greed, I said. This is an exit strategy. She and Brandon are drowning in debt, and they're likely facing major legal exposure from his online scams. They need enough money to disappear completely and start over somewhere else. $14 million would do exactly that. Grandpa nodded slowly. I think you're exactly right. We sat in silence for a long moment. The morning light streaming through the kitchen window was warm and ordinary, completely at odds with the conversation we were having. So what do we do? I finally asked. Grandpa picked up his phone and began scrolling through his contacts. There's a fourth attempt, he said quietly. I discovered it yesterday afternoon. Sarah filed a document at the courthouse on Friday, October 11th. I don't have all the details yet, but Patricia received a courtesy call from the clerk's office yesterday morning. A hearing has been scheduled. My heart sank. What kind of hearing? An emergency probate petition. Grandpa's face was grim. Sarah is attempting to have me legally declared deceased, appointing herself as the emergency administrator of my estate. She's using the fake September death certificate, the one that was supposedly corrected, as proof of confusion surrounding my status, claiming an immediate family emergency requires an expedited probate process to protect the assets. That's insane, I said. You're sitting right here, fully alive, which is why we need Patricia right now. He checked his watch. It was 7:42 a.m. Her office opens at 8:30. We need to be standing at her door the moment it opens. If Sarah's petition goes through and if a judge grants even temporary authority. He didn't finish the sentence, and he didn't need to. If Sarah gained emergency probate power, even for a few days, she could sell everything. Evergreen, the downtown building, liquidate the accounts, and move the money. By the time the court realized she used forged documents, the assets would be completely gone. Call Patricia. No, I said as Grandpa was already dialing. The drive downtown took 20 minutes through heavy morning traffic. Grandpa sat in the passenger seat in complete silence, his hands folded. The manila folder sat on the center console right next to his phone and the blinking recorder. I had thrown on a jacket and walked out the door without eating breakfast. The coffee in my travel mug sat cold and completely untouched. By 8 a.m., downtown Denver was a sea of brake lights and construction zones. I navigated down Spear Boulevard, the morning sun reflecting harshly off the skyscrapers. Patricia's office was on 17th Street, not far from Grandpa's commercial property, I realized. It was sandwiched right between a bank and a corporate headquarters. I parked on the third level of the parking garage next door. Our footsteps echoed loudly in the dim concrete garage as we walked toward the elevators. Neither of us said a word. On the 14th floor, the elevator doors slid open to reveal neutral carpeting and a polished brass sign, Anderson and Associates, Estate Planning and Elder Law. The glass doors were unlocked. Beyond a small, empty waiting area and reception desk lay an open office layout. Patricia Anderson was standing by a conference table, documents spread out in front of her like a battle map. She looked up as we walked in. Patricia was in her late 50s, with iron gray hair cut into a sharp bob. Her reading glasses rested on the bridge of her nose, matching her deep navy suit. She wore no jewelry except for a simple watch. Her office was a scene of organized chaos, with file boxes stacked against the walls, legal pads covered in notes, and a laptop glowing on the conference table. William, Richard, there were no pleasantries. Close the door. I did as I was told. How bad is it? Grandpa asked. She pointed to the paperwork. Worse than I thought. Sit down. We took our seats, and she pushed a thick document across the table. It had a blue legal backing and a formal court stamp. In the matter of the guardianship of William Charles Stone. Petitioner, Sarah Elizabeth Stone. My chest tightened immediately. Filed Monday afternoon, Patricia said, tapping the date stamp. October 14th at 4:30 p.m. I got a courtesy call from the court yesterday. The clerk recognized your name. What is she claiming? Grandpa's voice was steady, but his jaw was clenched tight. Patricia flipped through the pages. Advanced dementia, confusion, disorientation, total incapacity to manage affairs. She's claiming Richard is exploiting you, isolating you from the family, controlling your finances, and exerting undue influence to keep Sarah out. That's complete madness, I said. It's calculated, she replied, pulling out another page. She submitted witness affidavits, Robert Caldwell and Michael Torres, both claiming they observed William's decline over the past 6 months. She slid the 2 affidavits toward us. Each was accompanied by a professional-looking headshot of a well-dressed man in his 40s. Grandpa leaned forward. Never seen them before in my life. Neither have I. Patricia's expression was grim. Because they don't exist. I ran a reverse image search this morning. Caldwell's photo is a generic stock image. Torres's photo is a stolen LinkedIn profile picture belonging to a real estate agent in Florida who has absolutely no connection to Colorado. I balled my hands into fists. Fake witnesses. Fake witnesses, Patricia agreed. Forged signatures, fake photos. The affidavits include detailed specific dates, times, and locations. The catch is that on most of those dates, William was actually with you, Richard, or with me. We can easily prove he wasn't incapacitated. When is the hearing? Patricia's face tightened. Tomorrow, Wednesday, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The air felt like it was instantly sucked out of the room. Tomorrow? I repeated. How is that even possible? An emergency petition. Sarah claimed there was an immediate risk, that William was in danger of being exploited by Richard, and that assets were actively being misappropriated. She argued it required urgent intervention. Emergency petitions can be fast-tracked, and the judge granted a hearing within 48 hours. That gives us less than 30 hours, I said, checking my watch. It was 8:37 a.m. Yes. Patricia crossed her arms. If the judge grants even temporary guardianship, Sarah gains total control over William's person and property, access to accounts, medical decisions, the ability to sell assets. By the time we could file an appeal, the damage would be completely irreversible. Grandpa remained silent. So what's our move? We file an opposition motion first thing this morning, and we bring all the evidence to the emergency hearing. The fake witnesses, the forged documents, the ongoing FBI investigation, Jennifer Mason's confession, and the hospital scheme. I'm also going to file for a restraining order to block Sarah from accessing any accounts or properties. She pulled out another folder. It's already drafted. I just need signatures in every piece of evidence you have. The recordings, the emails, the bank alerts, and your FBI contact. We need to completely overwhelm the judge with facts before 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. Grandpa nodded. You'll have everything. Patricia's phone buzzed on the table. She glanced down at it. There's one more thing. The way she said it made my heart drop. She turned her laptop around to face us, displaying an email on the screen. Subject, urgent, location request. I've been monitoring communication traffic related to your case, Patricia said cautiously. Early this morning, this message from Brandon to a private investigator named Marcus Webb was flagged. It came through at 7:05 a.m. I leaned in to read the text. Webb. Need William Stone's location immediately. Paying $10,000 cash for a confirmed address and current movements. Need this today. Discretion fee separate. Keep this strictly between us. No records, no questions. Bat B. The color drained from my face. Brandon is trying to find him? I whispered. To physically locate him in the real world? It looks that way. Patricia's expression was stone cold. Marcus Webb is a private investigator based out of Aurora. He handles background checks, surveillance, and missing persons. He has a shady reputation, but no public criminal record. The mention of a discretion fee is highly alarming. It strongly implies Brandon wanted this handled completely off the books. But for what purpose? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Because if the guardianship petition fails, Grandpa said quietly, and the FBI is closing in, and the estate is slipping away, the only option left to stop me is to make me disappear entirely. The words hung in the air, cold and brutal. We don't know for certain that's his intent, Patricia said, though her tone didn't rule it out. But we have to treat it with absolute seriousness. I've already contacted a security consultant who is standing by. What about Webb? I asked. What is he doing? Patricia shook her head. I don't know. As far as I can tell, he hasn't responded to the message. Right then, my phone vibrated in my pocket. It was a text message from an unknown number. This is Marcus Webb. We need to talk. Meet me in 30 minutes. Third level of the parking garage you're parked in right now, northwest corner. Come alone. Bring William. I stared at the screen, stunned. What is it? Grandpa asked. I turned the phone around to show them. Patricia read the text, her face unreadable. He knows you're here. He's either tracking you or he traced your movements, Patricia said, walking over to the window. He could have easily run your license plate and followed you from your apartment. If Brandon hired him to watch me days ago, then he already knew where we lived, Grandpa reasoned. He knew our routine routes and knew we came here. I looked down at the text message. Come alone. Bring William. This could easily be a setup, Patricia warned. Or it's a warning. Grandpa's voice was remarkably level. If Webb wanted to cause us harm, he could have done it already. He knew where Richard lived. He could have made a move this morning. Instead, he's asking for a meeting. Maybe he wants to negotiate, I suggested. $10,000 is a lot of money. Maybe he's giving us a chance to outbid Brandon. Or he changed his mind. Grandpa looked me dead in the eye. Maybe he realized Brandon was asking him to cross a line he isn't willing to cross. Patricia turned back from the window. You aren't seriously considering going out there, are you? We don't have a choice, Grandpa said. If Webb is willing to talk, we need to hear what he has to say. He might have intelligence on Sarah's plans and what Brandon is actually up to. If he's warning us, we need to know exactly what we're up against. Patricia's jaw tightened. If you go, I'm calling the police to have them stand by right now. No, Grandpa shook his head. If Webb sees a police cruiser, he'll bolt, and we lose whatever information he has. Richard and I will handle the meeting. We'll listen, and if anything feels off, we walk away immediately. 30 minutes, I noted, looking at the time. It's 9:05 a.m. That leaves us 28 minutes. I don't like this at all, Patricia said. I don't like it either, I admitted. But he's right. Patricia stared at us for a moment before letting out a heavy sigh. All right, keep your phone line open. I'll listen in on the whole thing. If I hear anything remotely suspicious, I'm sending every downtown officer straight into that garage. Grandpa stood up. Fair enough. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, and it felt as heavy as an anchor. 30 minutes. Third level, northwest corner. A private investigator who was either trying to help us or drawing us into a trap from which we couldn't return. The parking garage felt noticeably colder than I remembered. The overhead fluorescent lights hummed loudly, casting a sickly yellow glow across the oil-stained concrete. Our footsteps echoed through the empty stalls and scattered cars as we walked toward the northwest corner. The third level was isolated, making it the perfect choice for a meeting you didn't want witnessed. He was waiting for us right next to a concrete pillar, his hands tucked into his jacket pockets. He looked to be in his late 40s, maybe 50, with short hair cut in a clean military style. He wore jeans, a dark jacket, and boots. He didn't move an inch as we approached, simply watching us with the still, focused posture of someone who had spent years operating in dangerous environments. "Mr. Stone," he said, speaking up as we stopped about 10 feet away. His voice was low and completely controlled. "I'm Marcus Webb. What do you want?" I asked. My hand stayed inside my pocket, holding the phone that was actively recording, with Patricia listening on the other end. "To warn you." Webb slowly took his hands out of his pockets and held up his phone. "Brandon Mitchell contacted me 4 days ago for a surveillance job. Track William Stone. Report his movements, routines, and locations. Standard work, so I took it." Grandpa's face remained completely unreadable, but I could feel the tension radiating off him. "And then this morning," Webb said, tapping his screen and turning it toward us. The timestamp read 7:05 a.m. I took a step closer to read the message. "Webb, need William Stone's location immediately. Paying $10,000 cash for a confirmed address and current movements. Need this today. Discretion fee separate. Keep this strictly between us. No records, no questions." B. It was the exact same message Patricia had shown us in her office. "I didn't reply," Webb said. $10,000 is a lot of cash, but I don't help people cause harm." "The message stopped being about surveillance, so you ignored him," Grandpa said calmly. "I ignored him?" Webb swiped to the next message. Sent 20 minutes later, Brandon had written, "Webb, 20,000 cash today. Just need the location." B. $20,000. I still didn't reply, Webb said. By then I knew Mitchell was completely desperate, so I kept monitoring his activity. He swiped the screen one more time, stopping on a message, and turned the phone back toward us. The timestamp read 8:43 a.m. Brandon had sent this message to a completely different number, to a different person entirely. I read the words off the screen. Need alternative option. Target is 86. Isolated. Mobile. Complete service package. Timeline. 24 to 48 hours. Payment upon completion. My blood turned to pure ice. "What exactly is a complete service package?" I asked, though a part of me already knew the dark answer. Webb looked me dead in the eye. "It's street slang used when someone wants a person gone. Permanently. Not just out of the picture. Disposed of. No body, no evidence, no questions." The concrete garage felt like it was tilting beneath my feet. "Brandon hired someone to end my life," Grandpa said. His voice was incredibly calm, even though the veins on the back of his hand gripping his cane were bulging. "He reached out to a contact," Webb corrected. "I don't know if anyone accepted the contract yet, but the fact that he's actively putting out feelers means he knows exactly how to navigate that world." I felt like I couldn't breathe. Up until now, we had been dealing with fraud, forged documents, and legal schemes. Not this. Not a literal threat to our lives. "Why are you telling us this?" I asked. Webb slipped his phone back into his pocket. "I'm a veteran. Army. Did 2 tours in Iraq and 1 in Afghanistan. I became a private investigator to help people, not to assist in harm. When I saw that message, I couldn't just stand by and do nothing." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, cheap flip phone, the kind you buy with cash at a convenience store. "A burner phone," he said, handing it over. "Untraceable. No records. My number is already programmed into it. If you need to reach me without Mitchell knowing, use this. Do not use your regular cell phones. He might have a way to track your location data." I took the phone. It felt completely weightless in my hand, almost insignificant given the weight of the situation. "You both need to disappear," Webb said. "Not forever, but you need to be completely off the grid for the next 48 hours. Go somewhere secure. Notify the authorities. And do not trust anyone within his social circle." "We have a guardianship hearing tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock, Grandpa said. If we don't show up, Sarah wins by default. Webb's jaw tightened. If you do show up, and someone is waiting for you out in the open, you won't even live to file an appeal. He's right, I said, turning to look at Grandpa. We can't go to the courthouse. We aren't running away. Grandpa's voice cut through the freezing air like a razor blade. We're going to the Evergreen Estate. I stared at him, panicked. Grandpa, that's 40 acres of completely isolated mountain land. If someone comes looking for us, then they'll be stepping onto my territory. Grandpa's eyes turned stone cold. I've lived on that land for 30 years. I know every single trail, every hidden path, and every blind spot in the security system. Down here in Denver, we're sitting ducks. Out in Evergreen, I set the rules. Webb studied him for a moment. Do you have any security up there? Nothing professional, Grandpa admitted, but I know the local law enforcement. Sheriff Bradford has been patrolling that mountain for 2 decades. Give them a call, Webb said. Get a deputy stationed out there immediately. If Mitchell hired someone, they're going to scout the area first. If they see a marked police cruiser on site, they'll likely back off. Or they'll wait, I muttered. It's possible, but at least you'll have an early warning system. Grandpa pulled out his cell phone and scrolled through his contacts. I'm calling Bradford right now. Webb nodded. My work here is done. I'm closing out Mitchell's file, returning his retainer fee, and deleting my notes. I want absolutely nothing to do with this. Thank you, I said genuinely. He looked at me, his expression grave. Don't thank me. Just stay alive. If you need to reach me, he pointed to the burner phone, use that. Stay off your regular numbers. He turned and walked away. 30 seconds later, the sound of an engine starting echoed from the lower levels of the garage, followed by absolute silence. Grandpa held his phone to his ear. Tom, Sheriff Bradford, it's William Stone. I need a favor. I listened as he calmly and carefully explained the situation, framing it as a serious security threat tied to an ongoing family legal dispute. He explained that he was driving up to the Evergreen property and wanted to request regular security checks and increased patrols over the next few days. Appreciate it, Jim. I owe you one, he said before hanging up. Bradford is sending a deputy out within the hour, Grandpa said. They're going to do a perimeter check and increase patrols along Elk Ridge Road. And then what? I asked, looking at my father. Then we drive up there, lock down the property, and wait for the hearing tomorrow. If someone wants to come looking for trouble. His expression was harder and more formidable than I had ever seen it. They're going to find out that I don't give up without a fight. I looked down at the burner phone in my hand, then looked back at my father. An 86-year-old man planning to stand his ground against a potential threat. We should call the FBI, I insisted. We'll call them the second we are safely inside the house, Grandpa said. For now, let's move. He was already walking toward our car, his cane clicking sharply against the concrete, his shoulders perfectly straight. I followed right behind him, slipping both phones into my pocket, wondering if we were driving toward safety or walking straight into a trap. Either way, we were heading to Evergreen. The gate was hanging open, just wide enough for a single vehicle to squeeze through. The heavy iron gate at the entrance of the Evergreen estate was warped at an unnatural angle. I slowed the car down as we approached under the midday sun. The padlock had been completely forced open. The metal was twisted, the paint was badly scratched, and the locking mechanism hung uselessly from the chain. Someone's been here, I whispered. Grandpa leaned forward in his seat. Keep moving slowly. I carefully drove through the clearing and up the gravel driveway. Fresh tire tracks were visible in the gravel, tracks that didn't belong to us. They were wide and heavy, likely left by a large truck just a few hours prior. I parked near the front porch. The house appeared intact from the outside, but as I walked up, I noticed signs of forced entry. The wooden frame of the window right next to the front door was badly splintered. Someone had tried to pry it open with a tool, but failed to get through. Tamen mei jinchu. They didn't get inside, Grandpa said, running his fingers over the damaged wood. But they certainly tried. Take a few photos, Richard. The gate, the tire tracks, the window. We need it for the record. Inside, the house was freezing, but untouched. There was no broken glass, and the rooms hadn't been ransacked. Grandpa walked straight to the security control panel in the main hallway. He pulled up the surveillance logs and scrolled through the timestamps. Right here, he said. Yesterday, Monday at 2:12 p.m.? The camera feed displayed the front of the house. A dark blue pickup truck drove into the frame, though the license plate was obscured. Two men stepped out. It was Brandon and another man, taller, heavily built, likely in his late 30s or early 40s. He wore a baseball cap, sunglasses, and a dark jacket. He moved with a cold, deliberate precision. The second man pulled a crowbar from his jacket and methodically went to work on the window, testing the locks. Brandon stood right behind him, hands stuffed in his pockets, looking incredibly nervous. After 3 minutes, the man stepped back and shook his head. He couldn't get through without shattering the glass and triggering the alarm. They got back into the truck and drove away. The timestamp says yesterday at 2:27 p.m., I noted. While we were downtown with Patricia, he was up here scouting the property, Grandpa murmured. And when that attempt failed, he reached out to an outside contact, I added, remembering Marcus Webb's warning about the 24 to 48-hour timeline. I'm calling Bradford. Sheriff Tom Bradford arrived 15 minutes later. He was in his late 50s, lean and weather-beaten, with a face that carried the lines of 30 years in mountain law enforcement. He knew Grandpa well and skipped the usual small talk. Show me what you found. We took him around the perimeter, showing him the gate, the tire tracks, the splintered window, and the surveillance footage. He watched the video twice. Do you recognize the man with Mitchell? He asked. No, Grandpa said. The guy knew what he was doing. He didn't smash the glass because he knew it would trigger your system, Bradford said, shaking his head. We don't have a clear face shot or a license plate, but I'll file the report. There's more to it, I said cautiously. We received a warning this morning from a private investigator named Marcus Webb. He claims Brandon reached out to someone regarding a physical threat, something dangerous, and he mentioned a 24 to 48-hour timeline. Bradford's expression hardened. Does Webb have proof? Screenshots, audio recordings, anything I can actually use? I hesitated. He showed us the messages on his phone, but he refused to send us copies. He's terrified of legal exposure. He took Mitchell's money initially to do basic surveillance, and now he wants completely out of the situation. Bradford's jaw tightened. So what I have right now is hearsay from an investigator who refuses to go on the record, and video footage of an attempted break-in that didn't succeed. He looked at Grandpa. William, I believe you. I've known you a long time, and I know you wouldn't make this up. But without hard evidence, without a verified threat message, or a witness willing to stand up in court, I can't get a warrant. I can't arrest someone based on underworld rumors. I understand, Grandpa said calmly. Bradford pulled out his phone and made a call. Jenkins, it's Bradford. I need you to add Elkridge Road to your patrol route for the next 72 hours. Roll past 4250 every 2 hours. Slow passes and check for any unfamiliar vehicles. If you see anything out of the ordinary, and I mean anything, call me directly. He paused. Yes, the situation with the Stone family is serious. Trust me on this one. He hung up and looked at us. I've scheduled increased patrols out here, at least once every 2 hours. If someone shows up, we'll know. If you see or hear anything at all, call my personal number immediately. Don't go through dispatch. Call me directly. He wrote his number on the back of a business card and handed it to Grandpa. William, I'll do everything within the boundaries of the law to assist, but I need you to understand that without evidence of an immediate crime, I can't station a deputy out here 24/7. I know, Grandpa said, and I appreciate everything you're doing. Bradford looked at both of us. Keep yourself safe. Lock all the doors and windows. Keep your phones charged. If Marcus Webb changes his mind and wants to hand over those screenshots, tell him I will protect his identity to the full extent of the law. He left at 1:30 p.m. We spent the rest of the afternoon securing the property, double-checking the locks, testing the alarms, and confirming the camera angles. By 7 p.m., the sun had dropped behind the peaks, and the temperature plummeted into the low 40s. We brewed a fresh pot of coffee, turned on the lights, and sat down in the living room. The sealed manila envelope sat on the coffee table between us, its thick wax seal completely intact. "It's time," Grandpa whispered. He picked up the envelope, broke the wax, and pulled out 2 separate documents. The first was a will, the last will and testament of William Charles Stone, dated October 8th, 2024. October 8th, the exact same day as the incident at the hospital. The document stated that William Charles Stone left his entire estate to Richard Michael Stone. Everything. The Evergreen property, the downtown commercial building, and all financial assets. To Sarah Elizabeth Stone, he left exactly $1. October 8th, I muttered. You knew back then that she was going to try something that day. We knew, Grandpa said softly. Margaret and I. He pulled out the second piece of paper. It was titled, Exhibit A, Anticipated Actions. July 2024. Conservatorship petition under grounds of incapacity. Failed. September 15th, 2024. Fabricated death certificate. Bribery. Failed. October 8th, 2024. Hospital power of attorney forgery. Failed. October 14th, 2024. Property fraud. Fraudulent witnesses. Pending. Anticipated escalation. Physical threats. Coercion. Dangerous tactics. Every single move had been listed, predicted, and dated. Margaret wrote this 2 years before she passed away, Grandpa whispered. She recognized the pattern early on, so we built a plan around it. I stared at the page, looking at my late wife's predictions playing out exactly as she had foreseen them. She protected us. She protected you, Grandpa corrected gently. Suddenly, the motion sensor alarm let out a sharp chime. We both froze. Grandpa stood up and walked over to the security monitor. The screen displayed the driveway camera feed in infrared light. A vehicle was slowly driving up the path. Its headlights were completely turned off. The timestamp read 11:23 p.m. Grandpa's grip tightened on his cane. It's starting, he said softly. I reached for the light switch and flipped off the living room lights. Oh! The vehicle crept up the driveway with its lights off, the gravel crunching loudly under its tires. In the infrared glow of the security monitor, it appeared as a dark silhouette. It came to a stop about 30 yards from the house. 2 doors opened. Sarah and Brandon stepped out. Brandon reached into the back seat and pulled out a heavy pair of bolt cutters. They're heading for the storage shed, Grandpa whispered, holding his cane firmly. The shed was located about 50 yards behind the main house, where Grandpa kept a fireproof safe containing original deeds, trust papers, and the LLC formation documents. I'm going out there, I said. I'm recording this. Grandpa held up his phone, his camera app already running. Capture every single word they say. I grabbed a heavy flashlight and stepped out onto the porch, the biting October wind hitting me instantly. By the time the beam of my flashlight cut through the darkness and hit Sarah and Brandon, they were halfway to the shed. They froze instantly in the bright light. Sarah, I called out. She spun around, shielding her eyes from the glare. Get back inside, Dad. No. She started walking toward me, with Brandon following closely behind. Up close, she looked like she hadn't slept in days. Brandon looked even worse, unshaven, his hoodie pulled low, tightly clutching the bolt cutters. This is private property, I said firmly. You're trespassing. This is family property, Sarah snapped back, her voice laced with venom. It belongs to me. It doesn't belong to you. The building! Her voice grew incredibly sharp. 145 17th Street. You honestly thought I wouldn't find out about it? I didn't answer. I found Mom's old files in her desk 6 months ago. The tax documents, the LLC filings, the rental statements. $80,000 a month, Dad. $80,000! She was shouting now, completely unhinged. That property is worth $15 million, and you tried to keep it all for yourself. You tried to cut me out completely by stealing it, I countered, by forging documents and bribing a hospital nurse. I was securing what should have been mine from the start. It was never yours. Brandon stepped forward, switching the bolt cutters for a heavy steel tire iron he had tucked away. Step aside, Richard. You want to add another charge to your list? I said, standing my ground. The FBI already has you on wire fraud. Now you're going to threaten me with a weapon? I'm not going to prison, Brandon yelled, though his voice was visibly trembling. He raised the tire iron in a threatening gesture. I lunged forward and grabbed his wrist, and we began struggling over the tool. After a chaotic 5 seconds, a powerful voice shattered the night air. Gula, that's enough. Grandpa stepped out onto the porch, holding his phone high, the red recording light blinking steadily in the dark. Every single word, Grandpa said, his voice deadly calm. Every threat, It's all on video. The FBI will have a copy of this tomorrow morning. Brandon dropped the tire iron. It clattered loudly onto the gravel. Sarah let out a sound, half sob, half shriek, and whipped around to face Grandpa. "You did this," she yelled, her voice trembling with rage. "You turned him against me. You and that woman he married. Mom was weak. She wasted her entire life taking care of everyone else. She just gave up. She died without even putting up a fight." Those words hit me like a physical blow. I couldn't breathe. "None of you deserve any of it." She was crying now, an ugly, desperate sob. "I worked for this. I planned for this. I stayed here when I could have left. I earned that money. And you two just sit there acting like you're better than me, like you're so righteous when you can't even see what's actually happening." "I see exactly what's right in front of me," I said calmly. Sarah caught her breath, freezing mid-sob. "My dad knew you would say that," I continued. "About Mom, about her being weak, about her giving up." Sarah's face instantly hardened into a mask of pure shock. "Mom told him you'd say exactly that. Years ago, she said, when she finally shows her true colors, when she has nowhere left to run, she'll attack her memory. She'll say she was weak." "That's not—" "She wrote it down," I said, "in her journal. She predicted every single word you'd say, every single thing you'd do." Sarah opened her mouth, then closed it. What journal?" Behind me, tires crunched heavily on the gravel. Sheriff Bradford's cruiser rolled up, its headlights turned off. He stepped out of the vehicle, his hand resting on his radio. "Richard, William, is everyone all right here?" "We're fine, Tom," Grandpa said. "But we have 2 intruders on the property. One of them threatened Richard with a weapon. It's all captured on video." Bradford's gaze drifted down to the tire iron on the ground, then to Brandon, and finally to Sarah. "Ma'am, sir, I need you to put your hands where I can see them." "This is a family matter," Sarah said desperately, her voice cracking. "We were just talking." "Ma'am, put your hands out." Bradford handcuffed Brandon first. "You have the right to remain silent." Then he turned to Sarah. She didn't fight him. As Bradford guided her toward the cruiser, she kept her eyes locked onto me, staring with pure hatred. When he opened the back door, she finally spoke. "What journal?" It was barely a whisper. I didn't give her an answer. Bradford secured them both in the back seat. Through the glass, I could see Sarah's face illuminated by the harsh glow of the dashboard lights. Her lips were moving, forming the exact same 3 words over and over again. "What journal?" Bradford walked back over to us. "I'll need formal statements, and I'll need a copy of that video." "You'll have it," Grandpa said. He was walking down the porch steps now, his movements slow and deliberate. He looked absolutely spent. At 86 years old, exhaustion was written into every line on his face, but in his free hand he was holding something else. It was a small brown leather notebook with worn edges. Embossed on the cover were 2 initials, M.S. Margaret Stone. "Ye ye yu wo mu guang xiang yu," Grandpa met my eyes, saying nothing. He simply held up the journal. Inside the cruiser, Sarah was still mouthing those exact words. What journal? She would never know, at least not tonight. Maybe not ever. But I would. It was 2 a.m. The police had finally left. The house was dead silent, save for the low hum of the security system and the occasional creak of the old wood settling. Grandpa sat across from me at the kitchen table. Between us lay that small leather notebook, the initials M.S. catching the faded gold reflection of the light. Margaret's journal. He had been carrying it with him ever since we left Denver. At the courthouse, during the driveway confrontation, through the arrests, he had kept it close the entire time, never mentioning it until he finally opened it just now. "Why didn't you show me this sooner?" I asked softly. "It's been 3 years. You didn't say a word." Grandpa rested his hands on the worn leather cover. His eyes were heavy with fatigue, but steady. "Because Margaret made me promise," he said, recalling her final days. "She made me swear that I wouldn't hand this over to you until your eyes were completely wide open." I stared at him. "What does that mean?" "It means she knew you." His voice was gentle but firm. "She knew that if I had shown you this journal a year or 2 ago, you would have tried to protect Sarah. You would have confronted her, tried to fix things and given her a chance to explain herself." "Of course I would have," I said. "She's my daughter. And that is exactly why Margaret waited." Grandpa tapped the journal. If you had confronted Sarah too early, she would have destroyed the evidence, deleted her search history, burned the files, and had Brandon hide the assets. She would have cried, apologized, and blamed it on her debts, her marriage, or her desperation. And you would have forgiven her, because that's who you are. My throat tightened. Margaret knew that, Grandpa continued. She knew you needed to see it all with your own eyes, not as a prediction, not as a warning, but as real active crimes. The hospital, the banks, the courthouse. She knew you needed to watch Sarah try to destroy us before you'd ever truly believe she was capable of it. He slid the journal across the table toward me. So she made me wait. She made me watch you go through every attack, every lie, and every single betrayal until you finally understood what Sarah had become. Only then was I allowed to give this to you. His voice softened. Margaret called it the golden moment, the moment when the fog of denials finally burned away and the truth can finally take root. I looked down at the journal, my hands shaking. Open it, Grandpa said. I opened the cover. March 15th, 2020. S asked me about the life insurance policy today, not about my health, not about the treatment plan, just how much it was worth and who the beneficiary was. R didn't notice. I did. May 8th, 2020. The gold bracelet and pearl necklace are missing. S offered to help me look for them at the pawn shops. She's the one who took them. R is too trusting to see it. July 22nd, 2020. Found S's search history on the shared iPad. How to forge a power of attorney. Elderly incompetence laws. How to prove incapacity. Took screenshots. Saved them in an encrypted folder. She's planning something. September 10th, 2020. Told William everything today. We've started putting a plan together. Recordings, documentation, the FBI contact. When this happens, I won't be able to protect R. William will have to do it. May 14th, 2021. 1 week left, maybe less. The hospice nurse says my liver is failing faster than expected. S came by today asking about the will, the probate process, and how long it takes to execute an estate. She's counting the days. She isn't grieving. She's waiting. May 18th, 2021. The final entry. I'm scared, not of dying. I've accepted that. I'm scared of what S will do when I'm gone. I've seen the pattern since she was a child. The stolen Christmas money when she was 12. The forged notes in high school. The lies about college expenses. It was always there. I just didn't want to face it. But I see it clearly now. I've done everything I can to protect the people I love. William, keep your promise. Wait for that golden moment. Don't let R forgive her too soon. Richard, this is not your fault. You loved her with everything a father could give. She chose this path, not you. I love you both. Emmy. I read that final entry 3 times over. Then I set the journal down, covered my face with both hands, and completely broke down. It was the first time I had truly cried since Margaret passed away. It wasn't the quiet, controlled tears of the funeral. It was a deep, primal sob that shook my entire chest and left me gasping for air. Grandpa didn't move, and he didn't say a word. He just sat there, steady and silent, exactly as he had for the past 3 years. When I finally looked up, the sky outside the window was turning a pale shade of gray. Dawn was breaking. She saved us, I whispered. Grandpa nodded slowly. Yes, she did. I looked back at the journal, tracing Margaret's handwriting on the page. All her foresight, all her love woven into every single warning. The golden moment. She was exactly right to make us wait. It was Wednesday at 1:47 p.m. when I walked into the Denver probate courthouse, Grandpa walking steady right beside me. Patricia Anderson followed closely behind, gripping her leather briefcase tightly. The doors to courtroom 3 stood wide open at the end of the long hallway. Sarah sat at the defense table wearing a gray suit. The black GPS monitor was visible on her right ankle. She had been granted bail earlier that morning, but remained under strict house arrest. Her attorney, Marcus Hunt, sat next to her with a completely rigid expression. Sarah never once looked at me as we took our seats. At exactly 2 o'clock, Judge Linda Morrison entered the courtroom. The gavel came down once. We are here to hear the emergency guardianship petition regarding William Charles Stone. Ms. Stone is the petitioner. Patricia stood up immediately. Your Honor, we represent Mr. William Stone and Mr. Richard Stone. We oppose this petition and request to present evidence proving this filing was submitted under completely fraudulent pretenses. Judge Morrison nodded. Mr. Hunt, call your first witness. We call Robert Caldwell. A man in his 40s walked up to the stand, took the oath, and sat down. Hunt began asking leading questions, inquiring if he had observed William Stone, appearing confused or failing to recall the names of family members. Caldwell answered yes to every single question. Patricia stood up for the cross-examination. Mr. Caldwell, can you confirm your current address for the record? He hesitated. 1247 Blake Street, Denver. Patricia opened a file on her desk. That is the address listed on your affidavit. However, public records indicate there is no record of a Robert Caldwell matching your description living at that location. She pressed a button on her remote, and the projector screen lit up. Caldwell's face appeared directly next to a reverse image search result. This is a generic stock photo. Shutterstock ID 47382910. Model name, Jack Renfrow. Located in Orlando, Florida. A low murmur rippled through the gallery. Patricia pressed on. Did you receive a payment of $500 via Venmo from Sarah Stone on October 13th? The man's face turned entirely white. I was hired to play a part. By whom? By Ms. Stone. She told me exactly what to say. Judge Morrison's gavel came down with a heavy strike. The witness is dismissed and will be referred to the DA's office for perjury. Mr. Hunt, do you have any other witnesses? Michael Torres, Your Honor. Patricia repeated the exact same process. A stolen LinkedIn profile belonging to a real estate agent in Florida, a $500 digital receipt, and a full confession of being hired to lie under oath. Judge Morrison's expression turned utterly grim. Call Mr. William Stone. Grandpa walked to the stand, his pace steady and unhurried. He placed his hand on the Bible and delivered his oath clearly. Mr. Stone, can you state your full name and date of birth for the court? William Charles Stone, born March 7th, 1938, 86 years old. And where do you reside? 4250 Elkridge Road, Evergreen, Colorado. I have owned that property for 42 years. Can you describe your daily routine for us? Grandpa leaned forward slightly. I wake up most mornings at 5:30 a.m. I brew coffee, read the Denver Post, and check my email and financial accounts. I manage a commercial property located at 145 17th Street downtown, which generates roughly $80,000 a month in rental income. I review tenant reports and coordinate with my property manager. I have breakfast with my son, Richard, 3 days a week. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, I volunteer at the VA hospital. Patricia skillfully guided him through the timeline, where he was on October 10th, his clear medical history, and his complete financial capability. Every single answer was detailed, precise, and delivered without a moment of hesitation. Marcus Hunt stood up to cross-examine, but he had absolutely nowhere to go. No further questions. Judge Morrison looked over at Patricia. Are there any additional witnesses? Yes, Your Honor. We call Brandon Mitchell, appearing under an immunity agreement with the district attorney's office. Sarah's head snapped up instantly. Brandon was escorted into the courtroom through a side door by federal agents. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit and was handcuffed. He took his place on the stand, carefully avoiding eye contact with Sarah. Patricia connected her phone to the courtroom's audio system. Mr. Mitchell, is this your voice? She hit the play button. Brandon's recorded voice echoed clearly through the room. You were the one who told me to do it. You told me to call the banks. Then came Sarah's voice. That was your plan, Brandon. Don't you dare. The life insurance, the properties, the fake death certificate, that was all you. The audio cut off. Patricia looked directly at Brandon. When was this recorded? Tuesday morning at 7:12 a.m. Did you, under the direct instructions of Ms. Stone, contact 3 separate financial institutions claiming William Stone had passed away? Yes. Did you hire Jennifer Mason to submit a fraudulent death certificate? Yes. Sarah paid her $5,000. And did you forge a power of attorney document dated October 10th? Yes. Sarah violently bolted upright from her chair. You're lying. Judge Morrison's gavel slammed down loudly. Ms. Stone, sit down and remain silent, or I will have you removed from this courtroom immediately." Sarah's lawyer pulled her back into her seat, but her face was completely distorted with rage. Patricia played more of the audio recordings, Sarah discussing the downtown commercial building, Sarah instructing Brandon to find someone who could make the old man disappear, and Sarah mocking Margaret's final days. She died weak. She died a coward. A dead silence fell over the entire courtroom. Judge Morrison took off her reading glasses. "I have heard quite enough. The guardianship petition is dismissed. Mr. Stone is clearly entirely competent and has been the target of a calculated, malicious fraud scheme." She turned her gaze directly onto Sarah. "I am referring this entire matter to the district attorney for immediate criminal prosecution. Charges will include exploitation of the elderly, wire fraud, conspiracy, and perjury. Potential sentencing guidelines suggest a term of 5 to 7 years in federal prison. Based on the severity of the evidence, I am revoking your bail. Bailiff, take Ms. Stone into custody." 2 bailiffs stepped toward Sarah. She stood up slowly, her face completely drained of color. For the very first time, I saw genuine, unadulterated fear in her eyes. They placed her in handcuffs and led her toward the exit. As she passed our table, she looked straight at me, her lips moving silently to form those same words one last time. "What journal?" And then she was gone. 10 minutes later, I stood out in the empty hallway. Patricia promised to send over official copies of the court orders before the end of the day. Grandpa stood right beside me, his expression perfectly still. In his left hand, he held that small leather notebook, the faded gold letters reading M.S. Margaret's journal, the journal Sarah would never get to read. Outside, the courthouse steps were a scene of absolute chaos. As I pushed open the glass doors with Grandpa beside me and Patricia a step behind, a wall of noise hit us like a physical force. Cameras flashed, microphones were thrust forward, and reporters shouted over one another in a deafening roar. "Mr. Stone, how does it feel knowing your own daughter tried to steal your legacy? Was this about the money or revenge?" Patricia raised a hand to block them. "No comment at this time. All inquiries can be directed to our office in writing." She guided us firmly toward the car waiting at the curb. A reporter managed to push a microphone directly in front of Grandpa's face. "Mr. Stone, do you believe your granddaughter belongs in prison?" Grandpa's stride never faltered for a second. Patricia opened the back door and we slid inside. The heavy door slammed shut, cutting off the noise instantly. "That's going to lead the evening news," Patricia noted from the front seat. "I'll have a formal statement sent out by 5 o'clock. I nodded slowly, but I wasn't really listening. My hands were still shaking. Grandpa placed his hand firmly over mine, steady, warm, and reassuring. Patricia caught my eye in the rearview mirror. "The criminal trial won't start for a few months, likely February or March. Brandon's cooperation earned him a plea deal. Probation, restitution, and 5 years of supervised release. No jail time, but he'll carry a felony record for the rest of his life." She paused for a moment. "If convicted on all counts, Sarah is looking at 5 to 7 years minimum. Those audio recordings are ironclad. Her public defender will likely push for a plea deal, but I don't see the DA offering anything under 4 years. "Good," I said softly. She dropped us off at a small, quiet cafe called Odessa, about 6 blocks from the courthouse. It was a peaceful little place with dark wooden booths and low jazz music drifting through the air. Grandpa and I took a booth in the back corner. I ordered a coffee, but didn't touch it. He ordered a tea and left it sitting. We sat there in absolute silence for 10 minutes. Then the front door opened, and I looked up. Daniel. My son stood in the doorway, scanning the room until his eyes met mine. He was 38 now, wearing a charcoal sweater and jeans, his dark hair showing the very first streaks of gray at the temples. He walked toward us with that careful, deliberate gait I had noticed over the past year. There was a slight tremor in his left hand, though it was mostly controlled by his medication. I had called him 2 days ago, right after our meeting with Marcus Webb in the parking garage, and told him everything: the hospital scheme, the fake death certificate, the guardianship petition, the threat from the outside contact. He caught the very next flight out of Seattle. "Dad," he said softly. "Grandpa." Grandpa gestured toward the empty seat. "Sit down, Daniel." He took his seat, folding his hands on the table. There was a mix of pure relief and heavy guilt in his expression. "I saw the news," Daniel said, "about Sarah, about the hearing. It's over," I told him. "She lost." "Good." He took a deep breath. "There's something I need to tell you. I should have said something months ago." Grandpa's gaze turned sharp. "What happened?" Daniel looked straight at me. "Sarah called me back in July. She asked me out to lunch, saying she wanted to reconnect and catch up. I hadn't spoken to her in 2 years, but I went anyway." He paused for a moment. "She spent an hour asking questions about you, Dad. Your health, your finances, your routine. And then at the very end, she made me an offer." My chest tightened immediately. "What kind of offer?" "She said she was worried about you, claiming you were acting erratic and forgetting things. She said Grandpa was too old to see the truth." Daniel clenched his jaw. "She offered me $500,000 to testify at a guardianship hearing that you were mentally unfit. She claimed it was all to protect you." $500,000. "What did you tell her?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "I told her to go to hell," Daniel said, his voice entirely flat. "I told her if she ever contacted me again, I'd go straight to the police. And then I called Grandpa." Grandpa nodded slowly. "August 2nd, you told me everything. I had no idea she would take it this far," Daniel said, turning back to me. "I didn't know about the hospital, the death certificate, or the banks. If I had known—" "You did the right thing," I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "You warned us, and you didn't take the money." "I thought about it," he admitted, tears welling up in his eyes. "I thought about it for maybe 10 seconds. The cost of my treatments, the uncertainty of Emma and Liam's futures. I considered it, Dad." I reached across the table and gripped his wrist tightly. "But you didn't do it." He nodded, wiping a tear away with the back of his hand. We sat together for another 20 minutes, speaking in low voices about the hearing, the estate, and Margaret's journal. Daniel asked if he could read it one day, and I told him he could. When we finally stood up to leave, Daniel pulled me into a tight embrace. I held him close, feeling the slight tremor in his left arm, sensing the years of distance finally starting to melt away. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the Denver skyline. Grandpa and I walked in silence toward the parking garage. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from an unknown number with a Jefferson County Jail area code. "I need to see you just once, please." I stared at the screen. Grandpa stopped right beside me. "Sarah?" "Yes." He didn't ask what the message said. He simply looked at me, his face calm and deeply patient. "Your choice, Richard," he said softly. "Whatever you decide, I'm right here with you." I stared at the text for a long time. Then, without replying, I slid the phone back into my pocket. "Let's go home," I said. Grandpa nodded. We walked toward the car together, and I never looked back. Oh. It was Thursday morning at 10 a.m. I sat in the visiting room at the Jefferson County Detention Center, waiting for my daughter. The room carried that distinct institutional beige flavor, cinder block walls, fluorescent lighting, and tables bolted firmly to the floor. A guard stood by the door with his arms crossed, completely expressionless. The air smelled of heavy disinfectant and stale coffee. I had left my phone and wallet in a locker outside and passed through the metal detectors twice. Now I sat with my hands folded on the cold table, listening to the low hum of the ventilation system. I hadn't told Grandpa I was coming. I made the decision at 3 a.m., while lying awake in my bed at the Evergreen house, thinking about Margaret's journal, thinking about the little girl who used to climb onto my lap and beg me to read her favorite bedtime stories, thinking about the woman who tried to have a court declare me legally incompetent. I needed to see her one last time, not for her sake, but for mine. The door buzzed open, and Sarah was escorted in by an officer. She wore a bright orange jumpsuit with the letters JCDF stamped across the back. Her hands were cuffed in front of her, her wrists noticeably red where the metal rubbed. She wore no makeup. Her hair was pulled back tightly, and her face looked incredibly pale under the harsh lighting. She looked remarkably small. The officer locked one side of her handcuffs to a metal ring on the table. 20 minutes. Sarah sat down slowly. When she finally looked up at me, her eyes were completely bloodshot. "Thank you for coming," she whispered. I didn't offer a response. "I never intended for things to go this far," she said, her voice shaking. Brandon's debts, the foreclosure notices, The collectors were calling every single day. I just needed a way out. I thought if I could just get a portion of the inheritance, we could fix everything. So you tried to have me declared legally incompetent. That was a mistake. I panicked. You hired fake witnesses, I said, listing the facts. You forged a power of attorney. You filed a fraudulent death certificate and paid a nurse $5,000 to lie for you. You called 3 banks claiming Grandpa was dead. With every word I spoke, she visibly flinched. And you tried to bribe Daniel, I continued, $500,000 to testify against me at a guardianship hearing. Her face went completely white. Daniel told you. He told Grandpa back in August. We knew right then that this wasn't desperation, Sarah. This was a calculated plan. Sarah clenched her hands into fists, the chain rattling against the table. I wasn't in my right mind. Margaret knew. The words hung heavily in the air. Sarah's head lifted slowly. What? I reached into my jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, a photocopy of a single page from the journal. I set it down on the table between us. She kept a journal. For the 2 years before she passed away, she documented every single thing you did. Sarah stared down at the paper. March 15th, 2020, I said softly. You asked about the life insurance policy, how much it was worth, and who the beneficiary was. She wrote, S asked about the policy today. Not about my health, but about the payout. Sarah's lips parted slightly. May 8th, 2020. Your mother's gold bracelet and pearl necklace went missing. She wrote, the jewelry is gone. S offered to help look for it. She's the one who took it. Stop it, Sarah whispered. July 22nd. She found your search history. How to forge a power of attorney. Elder incompetence laws. She took screenshots and saved them. I leaned forward. She knew what you were planning 2 full years before she passed. And she spent those 2 years building a file to protect us from you. Sarah's face crumpled entirely. Tears streamed down her cheeks, smudging old mascara into dark streaks. She never said anything because she loved you, but she loved me more. My throat tightened. She wanted to make sure I was safe. Sarah sobbed, her shoulders shaking violently. The guard by the door shifted slightly but didn't approach. I waited until she finally looked up, her face completely covered in tears. The district attorney offered you a plea deal, I said. 18 months if you cooperate fully. Testify against Brandon's outside contacts. Hand over all financial records. Admit to everything. If you take this to trial, you're looking at 7 years minimum. She nodded, her voice completely hoarse. My lawyer told me, Grandpa and I won't oppose the plea deal. 18 months with full cooperation. You'll be out sometime in mid-2027. I looked her dead in the eye. Danzai na jiho, nijo chudi chujula. But after that, you are completely out. No contact, no inheritance, no access to family accounts, properties, or trusts. Patricia is already filing a restraining order that goes into effect the moment you're released. If you violate it, you go straight back inside. She gasped. Dad, please. This is the end of the road, Sarah. You're getting 18 months instead of 7 years. That is all you get. Do you hate me? The question sounded so incredibly faint, so entirely broken. I looked at her for a long moment, the little girl who used to sit on my lap reading picture books, the teenager who painted her nails black and argued with me about curfews, the woman who stood beside me at Margaret's funeral, holding my hand tightly as the casket went down. I didn't even know who that person was anymore. I don't know what I feel, I finally told her, but I know I can never trust you. Margaret saw exactly what you were becoming, and she tried to warn me, but I didn't listen. She spent the final 2 years of her life building a plan to protect us from you. My voice cracked, and that breaks my heart more than anything else you've done. Sarah's face twisted in pain. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the concrete floor. Take the deal, Sarah. Serve your time and go start over somewhere else. But do not ever come looking for us again. We are completely finished. I turned and walked toward the door. Dad, I stopped, but I didn't turn around. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't answer. The door buzzed open and I walked out, retrieved my belongings, and stepped out into the crisp October sunshine. The air felt thin and remarkably clean. I took a deep, long breath. It was over, truly over. I got into my car and drove back up to Evergreen. The road wound through the foothills, the pine trees looking incredibly vibrant against the deep blue sky. The higher I climbed, the clearer the air became. By the time I reached Elk Ridge Road, the sun was high and bright. Grandpa was waiting for me on the front porch. He didn't ask where I had been. He simply handed me a fresh cup of coffee, still piping hot, and took a seat right next to me in one of the old wooden rocking chairs that used to be Margaret's favorite. We sat there looking out at the mountains in silence. After a long time, he asked quietly, "Did it help?" I thought about Sarah's tears, her apology, and the heavy weight of Margaret's journal that had sat between us. I thought about the absolute finality of walking out that door. "I don't know," I answered honestly, "but I had to do it." He nodded slowly. "Then that's enough." We sat there together until the sun began to drop behind the peaks, painting the sky in deep shades of orange and pink. The temperature began to fall, turning the air sharp and cold, but neither of us moved an inch. It was enough. By January 2026, a brutal cold had settled over the mountains. A thick blanket of heavy snow covered Elk Ridge Road, and all of Margaret's favorite wildflowers, the columbines, the Indian paintbrushes, the lupines, were buried deep under the white frost. I stood out on the back deck of the Evergreen estate, holding a warm cup of coffee, watching the steam rise into the thin, freezing air. The temperature hovered right around 15 degrees Celsius, but the sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. It was the kind of winter day that made the Rockies look like a postcard. Inside the house, through the glass doors behind me, I could hear Daniel's kids laughing. Emma was 10 now, curled up on the couch, reading a book about horses. Liam was 7, splayed out on the floor, building an elaborate castle out of wooden blocks. Daniel sat in the armchair by the fireplace, his left hand resting on the armrest. The tremor was barely noticeable today. The new medication had significantly slowed down the progression of his Parkinson's. It hadn't stopped it, but it had slowed it down, and that was enough. It had been 3 months since the hearing, 3 months since Sarah was led out of the Denver probate court in handcuffs, her face looking pale and hollow, giving me one final look before the bailiff closed the heavy door. 3 months since I watched my own daughter disappear into the very system she had spent months trying to manipulate. The phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out to see Patricia Anderson's name on the screen. "Richard, I wanted to give you a final update. Everything is officially locked down now. No loose ends." I leaned against the deck railing. "Locked down how?" "The trust restructuring, the property transfers, and all the court orders. It's completely finished. You are the primary beneficiary of the Stone Family Trust, with Daniel listed as secondary. The downtown property on 17th Street, the Evergreen Estate, and the Stone Mountain Assets LLC are all protected under an ironclad legal structure. Sarah won't be able to contest a single piece of it, even after her release." I closed my eyes and let out a slow, deep breath. "Thank you, Patricia. Sarah's sentence has been officially finalized," she continued. 18 months at the Colorado Correctional Facility in Cannon City. With good behavior, she'll be out in about a year, early 2027. The restraining order is permanent. She is required to stay at least 500 feet away from you, Daniel, William, and the grandchildren. If she violates it, she goes straight back to prison. What about Brandon? Brandon Mitchell completed his terms in December and moved out to Arizona last month. His ex-wife has full custody of their son, and he filed for bankruptcy 2 weeks ago. As far as we're concerned, he's a ghost. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. 1 more year until Sarah is free. 1 more year until that restraining order is the only barrier between us and whatever she decides to do next. "Are you doing all right, Richard?" Patricia's voice softened. "I know this hasn't been easy. I'm doing better than I thought I would," I admitted honestly. "Some days are definitely harder than others, but yes, I think I'm okay." "Good. If you ever need anything, give me a call." She hung up the phone. I slipped it back into my pocket and looked back out at the mountains. The snow-capped peaks stretched out endlessly under the winter sun, silent and completely unchanging. Margaret used to love this view. She always said the mountains were proof that no matter how hard the storm hits, some things are permanent. I really wish she could see it now. The letter had arrived 3 weeks ago. I found it in the mailbox at the end of the driveway, mixed in with the gas bills and grocery flyers. The return address was printed in small, stark black text. Colorado Correctional Facility, Cannon City, CO 81215. My name and address were handwritten in a neat, careful script. I knew instantly who had sent it. I brought it inside, left it sitting on the kitchen counter, and walked away. For 3 full weeks, I just left it right there. Unopened and untouched, a pale sliver of paper resting against the dark granite. A ghost I wasn't ready to face just yet. Daniel asked about it once when he came to visit for Christmas. "Are you going to read it, Dad?" "I don't know," I told him. He nodded and didn't push the matter further. That was just Daniel. Gentle, patient, and never demanding answers I didn't have yet. Grandpa never mentioned the letter at all. He saw it, of course, walking past it a dozen times a day, but he respected my silence. That was his way. He knew some decisions couldn't be rushed. Today, January 29th, 2026, in the quiet of the early morning, I finally sat down at the kitchen table and opened the envelope. "Dad, I don't know if you'll ever read this. I don't even know if you should, but I need to say it anyway. I tried to destroy you. I tried to take everything you and Grandpa built, everything Mom spent her life protecting. I tried to tear it all apart for money, for debts that shouldn't have even been your concern, and for a lifestyle I thought I deserved but never earned. I told myself I was desperate. Brandon's gambling debts were crushing us, the foreclosure notices were piling up, and I had no choice. But that was a total lie. I had a choice every single day, and I chose wrong. I chose to lie, I chose to manipulate, and I chose to harm the people who love me the most. Mom knew all along. I read the journal entries you mentioned in the visiting room. My lawyer obtained copies as part of the discovery process. She saw what I was becoming years before I even realized it myself. She recognized the pattern, the escalation, and the danger, and she stepped in to protect you from me. She loved me. I know she did. But she loved you more, and she was entirely right to do what she did. I'm not writing this to beg for your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm not asking you to visit me or write back or let me back into your life when I'm released next year. I know that door is shut, and I know I'm the one who closed it. I just need you to know that I am so incredibly sorry. I know it's not enough. I know it doesn't fix a single thing, undo the damage, or erase the pain. But it's the truth. I hope you and Grandpa are doing well. I hope Daniel's okay. And I hope Emma and Liam grow up happy and safe, far away from the chaos I created. I won't contact you again after this, I promise. I'm sorry, Dad. Sarah. I read the letter 3 times through. The first time my hands shook visibly. The second time my vision blurred. The third time I just sat in the quiet room, staring down at her handwriting. The neat loops, the straight margins, and the way she signed her name at the bottom. My daughter. The little girl who used to climb onto my lap and beg me to read her favorite bedtime stories. The teenager who cried in my arms after her first heartbreak. The woman who stood beside me at Margaret's funeral, holding my hand tightly as the casket went down. When exactly did she change? Or had she always been this way, and I was just too blind to see it? I carefully folded the paper, slipped it back into the envelope, and set it on the counter. I didn't write back. The next morning I drove down to Fairmount Cemetery in Denver. The roads were perfectly clear and the sky was a dull pale gray, holding the heavy threat of more snow. I parked near the entrance and walked along the familiar path toward Margaret's headstone, my boots crunching softly against the frozen grass. Her marker was a simple gray granite stone. It featured her name, her dates, and the phrase Grandpa and I had chosen together. Beloved wife, protector. I knelt down, brushing a light layer of snow off the top of the stone, and placed a small bundle of dried wildflowers, columbines and paintbrushes at the base. I had picked them last summer and pressed them inside one of Margaret's old books. She would have loved them. Your plan worked? I whispered softly. Everyone is safe. The estate is secure and Daniel's doing remarkably well. His new medication is working. Emma and Liam are happy. They still ask about you sometimes. A biting, freezing gust of wind whistled through the bare tree branches. Sarah's in prison. She'll be out early next year, but she isn't coming back. The restraining order is permanent. She wrote me a letter a few weeks ago saying she was sorry. I paused for a moment, my throat tightening up. I don't know if I'll ever forgive her. I don't even know if I want to. But I don't hate her anymore. I think that's what you would have wanted. You always used to say that hate is just love that has nowhere to go, so I'm letting it go. Not forgiving, just letting it go. I stayed there for another 10 minutes before standing up and walking back to the car. Late that afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the ridges, Grandpa and I sat out on the back deck. The temperature had dropped into the single digits, and our breath turned into white clouds in the air. The coffee in our mugs was steaming hot, but we didn't drink. We just sat side by side, watching the sky turn from blue to pink, and then into a deep purple. After a long silence, Grandpa reached over and gave my shoulder a firm squeeze. I nodded slowly. Sarah wanted wealth, and she got her punishment. I wanted the truth, and I got my peace. The mountains never change. People change, or they don't. Either way, the mountains remain standing. We sat there until the stars completely filled the night sky. Two men who finally understood that family doesn't always mean the people who share your blood. It means the people who choose to stay. Sarah's letter remained on the kitchen counter, read but completely unanswered. Maybe I'll write back one day. Maybe I never will. But today, January 29th, 2026, this exact moment is enough. The coffee, the mountains, and my father right beside me. Inside, I could hear Daniel's laughter as he helped Emma and Liam make hot chocolate. Margaret would have called this grace. I call it home. Looking back on everything that happened, I realize this story isn't just about a family betrayal. It's a profound lesson about trust, vigilance, and the devastating price of greed. Don't be like I was. I ignored the red flags. When Margaret told me she was worried about Sarah, I dismissed it as paranoia. I truly believed that love and blood were enough to keep us safe. I was entirely wrong. A family betrayal cuts deeper than any other wound because it comes from the people you are supposed to trust the most. Here is what I learned from this ordeal. Protect what matters. Margaret understood that unprotected wealth is nothing but bait for people who haven't earned it. She prepared the evidence, built the defenses, and trusted that the truth would guide us through the storm. Proverbs 22:3 says, "The prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple keep going and pay the penalty." Margaret was the prudent one, and I was the simple one until she stepped in to save me. Stories like ours are remarkably common. Elder exploitation is a real threat, and families turn on each other for money every single day. But a story about our elders can also be a powerful narrative of resilience, wisdom, and strength. My father, at 86 years old, stood firm when everything around us was splintering. He documented the truth and flatly refused to become a victim. He showed us that age brings profound wisdom, and sometimes the courage to fight back. We aren't promised a life free from betrayal, but we are given the strength to survive it. I am deeply grateful for the lessons that brought us through to the other side. If you are facing a betrayal within your own family, don't ignore the warning signs. Document everything, seek professional legal counsel, and protect the people who truly love you. Because blood doesn't always mean loyalty.